In this opening episode of Season 4, dive into Fallen Leaves by Will Durant. Learn how this posthumously published manuscript brings together his lifelong reflections on meaning, morality, and the human experience. From childhood memories to global philosophies, discover what Durant wished to leave behind as his final message to the world. So we're kicking off a new season, and wow, what an extraordinary dive we have ahead of us. I mean, the very idea of a lost work from a titan like Will Durant, a man whose story of civilization, written with his wife Ariel, quite literally defined history and philosophy for generations. Well, it already sets the stage for something truly special.
It really does.
To think there was a final, deeply personal message, a culmination of his wisdom, just waiting to be found and shared with the world. It's a remarkable discovery, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And what's truly fascinating here is that Fallen Leaves isn't just, another book in Durant's already massive bibliography. It's presented as his most intimate work, his most personal. A unique chance for him to finally articulate his own considered conclusions on life's biggest questions. You see, unlike his previous huge historical narratives, where he meticulously suppressed his personal views to stay objective.
Right, that objectivity was key to the story of civilization.
Exactly. But this book allowed him to step out from behind the academic curtain. It's him, unvarnished, offering his distilled wisdom on, well, everything. Our species' perennial struggles, its greatest moments of joy. It's not just a collection of essays, it's more like a testament, a final statement.
That context makes its journey to publication even more compelling, doesn't it? Because for years, there were these whispers, these tantalizing hints about this lost masterpiece. Durant himself actually spoke about it publicly.
He did.
Almost like a cherished secret he couldn't quite keep to himself. Imagine, back in January 1968, he's on TV in an interview, and he describes it as a work expressing my feelings about the various writers of our time and about the problems of our time.
Wow, that's incredibly broad.
Right. It hints at this sweeping personal philosophy. Then you fast forward to November 1975. The St. Petersburg Times noted he was actively working on Fallen Leaves, describing it as, look at this, a not very serious book, which answers the questions of what I think about government, life, death, and God.
Not very serious, huh?
Yeah.
Knowing Durant, that sounds almost ironic.
Doesn't it? And then, just a day later, the BBH Independent quoted him saying it would answer all the important questions, simply, fairly, and imperfectly. It almost sounds like a philosophical confessional,
Yeah.
A final chance to weigh in on, well, everything.
Yeah, it definitely carries that confessional tone. And the sheer amount of time he spent working on this specific manuscript, it really underlines how personally significant it was for him. He worked on it for, well, over a decade.
Over 10 years.
Yeah, starting around 1967, which is interesting because that's right around when he was releasing other big works like Interpretations of Life and The Lessons of History, and he kept refining it, kept pouring his thoughts into it right up until he died in 1981. So this longevity, it brings up a really important question for us. Why would such a deeply personal and significant work, something hinted at for so long by the author himself, then become so hard to find? Why did it almost disappear from public view?
Yeah, what happened?
What does that tell us about the nature of a life's work? Maybe, some insights are so personal, so woven into the self that they almost resist conventional publication. For years, even his own family, his heirs, they were mostly unaware of its true scope or even if it really existed.
Really? Even the family?
Largely, yes. And unless you happen to live in Los Angeles, where those specific interviews and articles popped up, the wider public, the people who loved his work, they had no clue this book was even being contemplated. It must have been genuinely frustrating for those who revered his intellect, thinking this potential final masterpiece had just vanished.
So the mystery really deepens there. The idea that this deeply considered final collection of thoughts, a summation of over 60 years spent researching everything, philosophies, religions, arts, sciences, civilizations, that it had just inexplicably been lost. It's almost like finding a final profound letter from a wise old sage who spent their whole life figuring out the human condition, only to realize that letter had been stuffed in a drawer somewhere, hidden for decades. That feeling of absence and then the serendipitous discovery, well, that's a story in itself.
Oh, the discovery process, like you said, it really does read like a detective story, a proper quest for a literary treasure. And the key figure here is John Little.
Okay.
He's the scholar who took on the huge task of moving the entire Durant archive to his home in Ontario, Canada, to actually catalog it systematically. Imagine, for months, he meticulously sifted through every single scrap of paper.
Everything.
Everything. Newspaper clippings, old essays, personal letters, even audio recordings, decaying movie film reels, magazine articles, cryptic little notes Durant had jotted down. It was an absolutely exhaustive process, like piecing together this vast intellectual jigsaw puzzle. He did find some tantalizing fragments, hints of a work in progress. There was even a direct reference to fallen leaves in a 1978 Los Angeles Times piece where Durant said he was anxious to get it done because, and this is quite poignant, he said, the pep is petering out.
Oh, wow. At that age.
Exactly. But despite these clues, there was no actual manuscript, not a single sheet of paper clearly labeled fallen leaves within the main archive he first processed. And remember, the archive had been looked through reasonably well after Durant died, which led to this initial, quite disheartening conclusion that the manuscript just wasn't there.
So it looked like a dead end.
It did. But little, he didn't give up. He systematically contacted various archive houses all over the country. Some were helpful, some less so. The real breakthrough finally came when one institution mentioned they had, in fact, sent copies of part of their collection, including some letters and a manuscript, back to the Durant estate years earlier.
Yeah. So it wasn't lost, just misplaced.
Sort of. This clue led him to Monica Mihel, who is Will Durant's granddaughter. And Monica, during the absolute chaos of a house move, quite literally stumbled upon this nondescript box, just a plain box marked simply Durant copies.
No way.
Yes, and what an incredible find it was. Inside were not only about 2,100 pages of correspondence between Will and Ariel Durant, a treasure trove in itself, some of which later got published in a dual autobiography, but also, crucially, various drafts of the long-lost manuscript for Fallen Leaves.
Unbelievable. Just sitting in a box.
Just sitting there. So what was lost had now been found and could finally be made known to the world. It's just a remarkable testament to sheer persistence and, frankly, a bit of incredible luck.
What an amazing stroke of serendipity for literary history. And what makes Durant's reflections in Fallen Leaves so uniquely profound, so essential for us to consider, is exactly that backstory, isn't it? It's the culmination of his 60-plus years spent researching the philosophies, religions, arts, sciences, and civilizations of the world.
Yeah.
This isn't just, an old man looking back. It's a historian who has, in a very real sense, walked through millennia of human thought, turning his gaze inward for one last comprehensive assessment.
Precisely. And to really feel the weight of his words, you have to consider the sheer arc of Will Durant's life. Born 1885, died in 1981, he lived for almost a century.
An incredible span.
An incredible span that saw some of the most profound, most cataclysmic transformations in human history. He witnessed and he processed 2 devastating world wars, the horrors of the Great Depression, the rise and fall of various ideologies, socialism, anarchism, totalitarianism, the really dramatic decline of traditional religious belief in the face of science.
Right, the whole Darwinian revolution and its fallout.
Exactly. And the radical shifts in American morals, from the strict Victorian era all the way to the free-spirited ethos of Woodstock. Think about the technological leaps he saw. Transportation went from horse-drawn carriages to men walking on the moon.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that scale of change in one lifetime.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's just astonishing to think about the sheer volume of change he observed. And through it all, he consistently spotted these fascinating, often predictable cycles in human behavior, patterns that just repeat across civilizations. And patterns like that, especially when you view them against the backdrop of humanity's vast historical tapestry, they are undeniably worth sharing, right, for the benefit and education of future generations. He grappled with questions that still resonate so strongly with us today.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like, what, for instance, could be said for religious faith after Darwin and science seem to have, knocked God off his traditional throne in heaven, leaving for some just the gloomy angst of existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre? What is it deep in our nature that makes wars and conflict seem almost unavoidable?
Yeah, the perennial questions.
Exactly. And on a more personal level, what's the deeper meaning of life, of love, of the search for happiness? What's the fundamental purpose of art or of science? What educational approaches really work best for shaping young minds? And a question that pops up often in his more personal writing, what is it that makes man, or at least, one man, so drawn to woman? These were the kinds of fundamental questions that a thinker of Durant's huge caliber sought to answer, offering this message of profound insight for anyone navigating their own life's journey.
That's a perfect bridge, then, to understanding the deeply personal drive behind this final work. Why would someone at 95, I mean, a man whose views were so deeply rooted, so meticulously researched, why would he suddenly decide it was time to tell the world, or 100 millionth of it, just what I think on everything?
Right.
It seems audacious, almost a challenge to his own legacy of objective history, yet somehow totally fitting for a mind that spent decades synthesizing global thought. What was his motivation for this final, really candid outpouring?
Well, his motivations, as he very candidly admits in his own preface, they're layered and surprisingly human. He starts off with a bit of self-deprecating humor, writing, "Vanity increases with age. Here I am, going on 95. By this time, I should have learned the art of silence."
Oh, yeah, wait.
He acknowledges the narcissism implicit in all authorship, which is a very honest self-assessment, I think. But beyond that charming self-awareness, he states a more practical and maybe quite poignant reason: his sheer inability to do anything else with continuing interest.
Wow. Just can switch off that brain.
Yeah. Apparently not. Imagine a mind like his, constantly needing intellectual engagement, finding, regular pastimes, just not enough. He also offered what he called a vain excuse, responding to the countless letters of curious readers who have challenged me to speak my mind on the timeless questions of human life and fate.
Ah, so reader demand played a part.
He claims so, perhaps partly tongue-in-cheek, but this is a really crucial point because throughout his massive story of civilization, he made a conscious, incredibly disciplined effort to suppress his own ideas and beliefs. He had to do full justice to the thoughts and philosophies of others. And the fact that Durant, who clearly had such strong convictions, managed to do that for over 40 years across 10 huge volumes covering thousands of years of history? Well, that's quite a wonder in itself.
It really is an act of immense intellectual discipline.
Totally. He had been the diligent chronicler, the objective observer, and now finally he was stepping forward as the philosopher, the sage, offering his direct, unfiltered thoughts on those ultimate riddles he'd touched upon in earlier, more explicitly philosophical works like Philosophy and the Social Problem, The Story of Philosophy, Transition, The Mansions or Pleasures of Philosophy, and On the Meaning of Life. This book, Fallen Leaves, was his freedom, his ultimate intellectual liberation, you could say.
So this is Durant unvarnished, finally free from the chains of historical impartiality, offering his intensely personal synthesis. And the scope he laid out for Fallen Leaves was just monumental. He wanted to see human existence as a whole from the moment when we are flung unasked into the world until the real on which we are bound comes full circle in death. I mean, that sounds like a lifetime's project, let alone something for a man in his 90s. How did he even propose to achieve such a sweeping circumnavigation of the intellectual globe?
Well, he certainly aimed high, didn't he? But his approach was actually quite practical and accessible. He proposed to achieve this huge circumnavigation by basically following the natural progression of human life. His plan was pretty clear. As we pass through the ages of man's life, through childhood, youth, maturity, and old age, let us face the major problems of philosophy and metaphysics, ethics, politics, religion, and art.
Okay, so tackling the big themes stage by stage.
Exactly. And crucially, this wasn't meant to be some dense, abstract academic treatise. It's important to clarify what he didn't intend. He wasn't trying to construct, quote, no new system of philosophy, nor any world-shaking cogitations. Instead, he framed these reflections as human confessions, not divine revelations. They are micro or mini essays. This makes them really digestible, like bite-sized pieces of wisdom. And he specifically emphasized their accessibility, noting that Durant's insights and recommendations are not only practical, but easy for lay people to comprehend.
So wisdom for everyone, not just academics.
Yeah. That was absolutely the intention. A philosophical guide for anyone navigating the complexities of existence, delivered with his typical clarity and, well, elegance.
And what a journey it promised to be, right?
Yeah.
Moving through the stages of life, each stage becoming a window into different philosophical problems, different human experiences. This broad vision really shaped the book's structure. As you can see, just looking at the chapter titles, they guide you through that same progression.
Right.
It sounds like a beautifully organized final thought.
It was, yes, but the manuscript itself actually had an interesting, slightly tangled evolution. The original concept for Fallen Leaves was for Durant to present his own views on various social, religious, political issues, drawing on some revised older writings, but also adding entirely new material.
Okay.
But then he planned a really significant second part, a comprehensive survey of modern literature and philosophy, featuring critical assessments of major thinkers and writers. He even finished one chapter for the second part, a deep dive into the ideas of various authors. However, he apparently felt uncomfortable making such pronouncements without Ariel accompanying him. Their intellectual partnership, forged over decades working together on the story of civilization, it was just too deeply ingrained.
He needed her perspective.
It seems so. This discomfort led to a really pivotal decision. He brought Ariel into the project, and that second half, the Survey of Modern Thought, it became so detailed, so intellectually weighty, that it actually blossomed into an entirely separate book.
Which one was that?
That became Interpretations of Life, which was published in 1970. And it was probably a very wise move because going straight from one man's very personal philosophical reflections into this exhaustive survey of the books, art, and philosophies of 26 other novelists, poets, philosophers, well, that would have been quite a jarring leap in a single volume.
Yeah, that makes sense. Two distinct projects, really.
Exactly. So, after Interpretations of Life was published, Durant, with this renewed focus, he went back to work on Fallen Leaves and kept refining and expanding it right up until his death in November 1981. It made his final years remarkably, even, you could say, inordinately prolific. He just couldn't stop the flow of ideas.
Amazing energy. Let's truly immerse ourselves now in one of these micro-essays, just to offer a glimpse into the unique insights he offers. Let's dive into Chapter 1. Our Life Begins. The very first lines of this chapter set this immediate tone of wonder, drawing on Walt Whitman's evocative words. A group of little children with their ways and chatter flow in, like welcome rippling water over my heated nerves and flesh.
Beautiful line.
Isn't it? It suggests both this delightful relief from the burdens of the adult world, but also maybe a profound truth waiting to be uncovered just by observing the youngest among us.
Yeah, and Durant's opening observations on why we're so drawn to children are quite telling. He starts, interestingly, with a touch of human nature's less flattering side. He notes we like them, first of all, because they are ours, prolongations of our luscious and unprecedented selves.
A bit selfish then.
Right, that fundamental, almost selfish aspect of parenthood, of generational continuity. But he quickly moves beyond that into a deeper appreciation. He explains we also like them because they are what we would but cannot be coordinated animals, whose simplicity and unity of action are spontaneous.
That naturalness we lose.
Precisely. They embody this naturalness, this undisguised directness of their instincts that we adults have long since buried or complicated. He particularly admires their unhypocritical candor, and he quotes that German proverb, Kinder und Narren sprechen die Wahrheit, children and fools speak the truth. And he suggests that somehow they find a genuine happiness in this very sincerity in their unfiltered existence. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, of a purer, less complicated way of being. Like a mirror reflecting what we might have once been and what maybe we secretly yearn to rediscover.
That candor, that unfiltered nature, it really is striking in children. And then Durant pivots to the very, very beginning, the newborn's initial, quite jarring entry into the world. He describes this fragile new life as dirty but marvelous, ridiculous in actuality, infinite in possibility.
What a phrase.
It's such a vivid, almost raw image. And it prompts him to pose this incredible foundational question. Can you conceive it that this queer bundle of sound and pain will come to know love, anxiety, prayer, suffering, creation, metaphysics, death? It's just a powerful summary of the entire human journey lying ahead, isn't it? A reminder of the immense potential held within that tiny, vulnerable little form.
And the initial experience, as Durant describes it, it's one of overwhelming sensory overload and often pain. He paints a really stark picture. The sudden need to breathe hurts. Seeing light pierces the eyes. Hearing noise terrifies. The sudden exposure to cold strikes his skin, and he seems to be all pain.
Oof, sounds rough.
It does. Yet nature, in its wisdom, provides this crucial protective buffer, a general insensitivity. The newborn's eyes see light only dimly, as if through a veil, and sounds are heard muffled and distant like echoes. For the most part, he sleeps, Durant notes, as if escaping this constant assault of new sensations.
A built-in defense mechanism.
Seems like it. He also notes the striking physical resemblance of the infant, calling the baby a little monkey because until he walks, he will be like an ape, with the incalculable flexibility of a frog's legs, a legacy of life in the womb. But the truly crucial turning point, he observes, isn't just learning to walk, which is a huge physical achievement.
Right.
It's acquiring language. Not till he talks will he leave the ape behind and begin to climb precariously to the stature of a human being. For Durant, speech is the defining characteristic. It's the cognitive leap that truly sets humanity apart from its primal origins, enabling abstract thought, complex social interaction, and the very transmission of culture and wisdom down through generations.
And from that initial chaos and sensory overload, the child slowly, painstakingly begins to learn. Durant really examines this process keenly, doesn't he? Describing how children acquire knowledge bit by bit, not through formal lessons, but through random movements of exploration.
Yeah.
The world, for the child, is this bewildering, boundless puzzle, and their haphazard responses of grasping, biting, and throwing are like the first tentative attempts to figure out its rules, its textures. Curiosity consumes and develops him, he writes. He would touch and taste everything from his rattle to the moon. And what's particularly insightful, I think, is Durant's observation that children learn largely by imitation. They just absorb the behavior they see around them, even if parents stubbornly believe their kids are learning mainly by sermons, but what they're explicitly told.
Yes. And that's precisely where Durant brings in his sharp, almost biting critique of parental hypocrisy. He argues with a sort of knowing wink that our children bring us up by showing us through imitation what we really are.
Ouch. A tough mirror.
It is a profound and often uncomfortable mirror held right up to us adults. He gives these vivid, poignant examples that I think many of us, whether we're parents or just observers, can immediately recognize. Parents might teach him gentleness and beat him. They teach him mildness of speech and shout at him. They teach him a stoic apathy to finance and quarrel before him about the division of their income. They teach him honesty and answer his most profound questions with lies.
That's depressingly accurate sometimes.
Isn't it? Durant suggests that children, just through their innocent imitation, expose all our inconsistencies, the gap between the values we say we hold and how we actually behave. It's a really powerful lesson, not just for people raising children, but for anyone who observes humanity. He implies that true education comes not from rules spoken aloud, but from the examples lived out. And children are the purest, most honest reflections of our authentic selves. It certainly encourages you, the listener, to reflect on your own experiences, doesn't it, with children, or even just observing parenting. Makes you wonder what subtle lessons we're all imparting without even realizing.
That's a really humbling thought, isn't it? That our kids are, in a way, our most accurate biographers. So, okay, what does this all mean on a grander scale? How does watching a child, this tiny, curious being just grappling with its immediate world, how does that reveal what Durant considers the very basis of things? It seems like a big leap from the nursery to the deepest philosophical concepts, but he clearly makes that connection.
He absolutely does. Durant finds, in just observing childhood, this profound, almost mystical philosophical statement that goes way beyond mere biology or psychology. He sees life itself not as an abstraction, but as a flowing reality that breaks through all our mechanical categories, all our physical formulas.
A flowing reality.
Yeah. For him, this expansive urgency, this patient effort and construction, this resolute rise from hands to feet, from helplessness to power, from infancy to maturity, from wonder to wisdom, that's not just biological development, it's something far, far deeper. And he connects it directly to the highest, most profound philosophical concepts. He sees in this vital, striving force the essence of Spencer's unknowable, that ultimate reality beyond our grasp. Kant's noumenon, the thing in itself, separate from our perception. The scholastics' ens realissimum, which means the most real being, the supreme ultimate reality. Aristotle's prime mover, the uncaused cause of everything. And Plato's to ontozon, which literally means that which really is, the true eternal forms behind our transient world.
So he's seeing the ultimate philosophical questions embodied in a developing child.
In essence, yes. What Durant is saying is that the very spark of life, this fundamental urge to grow, to understand, this inherent discontent that drives creation and seeking, that is a more direct, more intuitive window into ultimate reality than any physical law or mechanical explanation could ever be. He states it quite firmly. Here we are nearer to the basis of things than in the length and breadth and thickness and weight and solidity of matter, or in the cogs and pulleys and wheels and levers of a machine. For Durant, life is inherently active and striving. Life is that which is discontent, which struggles and seeks, which suffers and creates. And he argues really passionately that no mechanistic or materialistic philosophy can do it justice, or understand the silent growth and majesty of a tree, or compass the longing and laughter of children. It's this powerful affirmation of life's vital, uncontainable essence, its inherent will and purpose, far beyond just reductive explanations of mechanics. It's his way of saying the mystery of existence is best understood by observing life itself in its most fundamental striving forms, rather than by just dissecting it into inert parts.
That's a truly powerful statement. An argument for life's inherent will, its striving force, a philosophical core witnessed right from the beginning. And to distill all of that, all the wonder and profound insight he drew from observing a child, Durant offers this wonderfully concise, almost poetic definition of childhood itself. Childhood may be defined as the age of play. Therefore, some children are never young, and some adults are never old. And from these profound observations on childhood, Durant truly casts his net incredibly wide, doesn't he? We talked about his promise of that circumnavigation of the intellectual globe. And when you look at the sheer breadth of topics covered in Fallen Leaves, he absolutely delivers. He moved from the deeply personal reflections we've just discussed to these sweeping societal issues, touching on nearly every facet of human experience. He really left no stone unturned in this final reflection, did he?
He certainly didn't. And the chapter titles themselves give you a really clear sense of that incredible scope. Beyond Our Life Begins, the book just systematically progresses through the human lifespan, touching on the unique challenges and insights you glean from each stage. He dedicates chapters to on youth, grappling with idealism versus the harsh realities of the world. Then on middle age, where he reflects on responsibilities and maybe growing wisdom. On old age, facing decline, but also the quiet strength found in endurance. And finally, on death, contemplating the ultimate human experience.
So the whole arc of life.
The whole arc. But he doesn't stop there. He then dives into these profound metaphysical and spiritual questions. Chapters like Our Souls, exploring the essence of human consciousness. Our Gods and On Religion reflect on humanity's search for meaning beyond the material. A theme, as we discussed, that was so deeply impacted by the rise of science in his lifetime. He even includes On a Different Second Advent, which is a pretty unique take on societal transformation, and On Religion and Morals, examining how belief systems and ethical frameworks are all tangled up together.
And the practical societal stuff is just as comprehensive, you said.
Exactly. He moves into ethics and society with, frankly, unflinching honesty. On morality, grappling with the ever-shifting standards of right and wrong. On race, offering his thoughts on human diversity and conflict, a topic especially relevant given the global upheavals he lived through. On women, provides a glimpse into his views on gender roles and societal progress, which, as we'll touch on, offers a fascinating historical lens. And on sex, delves into the complexities of human intimacy and its societal implications.
And politics, history.
Yep. Shifting gears to politics and history, he tackles On War, drawing on millennia of conflict to try and distill universal lessons about human aggression. His chapter on Vietnam is particularly interesting, not really as a political stance on that specific war, but more as a historical case study. He uses it to extrapolate broader insights about a nation's power, the dangers of imperial ambition, the cyclical nature of geopolitical folly,
Right, using a specific event for larger lessons.
Exactly. He also dissects On Politics more generally and offers his considered opinions on capitalism and communism, reflecting on the huge ideological struggles of the 20th century. And finally, he considers culture and knowledge themes obviously very close to his heart as a historian and philosopher. On art, exploring its purpose and power. On science, reflecting on its incredible advancements but also its limitations. And on education, providing his wisdom on shaping future generations, which ties back nicely to some of the insights from the childhood chapter. These chapters, taken together, are Durant truly just spilling forth his views on such a wide range of topics, and it's all delivered with his characteristic strong opinions, that elegant prose, and these deep, often really surprising insights. It's a genuine intellectual feast where you really feel a lifetime of learning just pouring onto the page.
It truly sounds like an incredible intellectual feast, a mind grappling with almost every major facet of human existence, offering his final synthesis. But as with any work written over a lifetime, especially one reflecting on changing social norms and an author's personal journey through history, some of Durant's views might feel a little dated to a modern ear, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned his occasionally paternalistic discussion of women, for example. This raises a really important question for us as readers today in our contemporary context. How do we read and engage with these insights, especially when they might challenge our modern sensibilities or clearly reflect the era in which they were written?
Yeah, that's a crucial question, and it's really essential for anyone diving into Fallen Leaves. We absolutely must remember that Durant didn't stand outside of time, but decidedly within it. He was a man steeped in millennia of history, no doubt, but he was also very much a product of his own era. As he once put it so eloquently, he saw himself as a drop of water attempting to analyze the sea, acknowledging the vastness of knowledge beyond his own individual viewpoint.
That's a great quote.
Isn't it? And it's precisely because this is true, because he was so deeply immersed in the historical currents he chronicled, that the observations he makes in Fallen Leaves are actually so resonant. They offer a window not just into his mind, but into the whole intellectual landscape of his time.
So context is key.
Absolutely critical. We should approach this work with a strong sense of historical context, allowing for the natural progression of ideas and societal values over time. For example, when you read his chapter on Vietnam, the real value isn't necessarily in dissecting his specific political leanings at that moment. It's in extracting the broader historical insights that still apply insights about national power, the pitfalls of ideological fervor, the cyclical nature of imperial ambition, no matter how idealistic the initial intentions might seem.
Hmm.
Similarly, when he discusses on women, while yes, some phrases might indeed strike a modern ear as paternalistic, it's vital to contextualize them within the societal norms and the intellectual discourse of the mid-20th century. Look for the enduring wisdom within those observations, the underlying principles that actually transcend time. You'll find, for instance, this recurring liberalism, a foundational faith in liberty and equality, and their gradual, often painful spread that actually permeates all of these chapters, even when the specific applications might differ from how we think today. The goal, for us as engaged readers and listeners, should be to enjoy the full measure of these chapters' wisdom, to appreciate the profound insights and the sheer scope of his thought without feeling we have to agree with every single statement or paragraph.
Right. Take the wisdom, understand the context.
Exactly. Like the countless historical figures that Durant populated his and Ariel's massive opus with, Durant himself has more than earned that benefit of contextualization. We grant them the grace of their time. He surely deserves the same. His insights, even when they challenge us, are always thought-provoking.
That's a vital point. Separating the timeless wisdom from the temporal context. Fallen Leaves truly is a treasure, isn't it? Durant's final unpublished work, this last manuscript, it's a major literary event for anyone who treasures history, philosophy, and just compelling prose. It's testament to a life lived so fully, engaged with the deepest questions right to the end.
Yeah.
It was certainly worth the wait.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what do we really learn from a life lived so fully, contemplating such profound questions right to the very end? Durant, at 95, captured this lifelong drive so beautifully when he said he felt the thirst for unity draws me eternally on. He sought to chart this wilderness of experience and history, to bring into focus the future, the unsteady light of the past. It's such a powerful reminder that the pursuit of understanding, the quest for meaning, it's not a finite project with an end date. It's a continuous, lifelong journey, one that evolves with every year and every challenge. Durant left us not just a book, but a living example of intellectual curiosity that simply never dimmed. So perhaps we're left to ponder. What wilderness are you trying to chart in your own life, and what insights, like Durant's invaluable Fallen Leaves, might guide your path?